Hello everyone, it is Monday, October 30th, 2017, and this is the Monday Morning Analyst here on MMAfighting.com. I'm the host of this podcast. My name is Luke Thomas. Thank you so much for watching. 3 parts to the podcast, as always. A review of the weekend's action. We take a look at something in depth with multimedia in the second segment, and then a look at what's coming up ahead in the third segment. Not a moment to waste. Again, there's always some big events beyond what we cover on the scope of this podcast. Anthony Joshua fought in boxing, for example. But for the purposes of today's podcast, we're just going to focus on UFC Sao Paulo, which took place on Saturday. So this event, which can be called a number of different things, UFC Sao Paulo, UFC Fight Night Brunson Machida, UFC Fight Night 119. This took place at the Ginásio, I don't know how to pronounce properly, do Ibirapuera in Sao Paulo, Brazil. Had an attendance, I do not have gate figures, but it had an attendance of 10,265. As a matter of fact, I actually might have gate figures. Yes, I do. Actually, no, just the attendance, 10,265. This was headlined by a middleweight contest between Brunson and Lyoto Machida. Derek Brunson winning via KO at 2:30 of the very first round. How did he do it? Pretty simply, Lyoto Machida had his moments. There were two southpaws facing off. Lyoto Machida had his moments where he was able to time the left hand as Brunson came in. I think he landed 2 solid ones through the first portion of that first round. Yeah, at 2:30. So they fought about half a round. The major issue was you see Brunson float a right hand, which Lyoto tried to counter. Brunson dipped and ducked to his left, and when he came up, was able to roll and land his own left and just absolutely cracked Machida dead to rights. He must have prepared for that. He must have known Machida was going to be there. That must have been something they absolutely game planned around. Machida was looking pretty good early. His movement looked okay. He didn't look overwhelmed. In fact, if anything, he looked motivated to really be out there and be back and doing this again, giving these spirited stare downs for the weigh-ins and other press events. It's just his age has caught up to him, I think. He's nearly 40, I think 39 years old, and I'm sure Brunson can deliver a hell of a shot because this is not the first knockout he's had. He's had a number of these now at this point. Not so much against Anderson Silva necessarily, or Robert Whittaker, but he's clearly got a few scalps there in his collection. I think all of his UFC wins, or all of his UFC stoppages, are by KO or TKO. So he clearly can crack, and he caught him dead to rights. Actually, I thought the way he finished Machida, didn't give him a second to at all recover. Sort of reminded me of Romero's finishing him with those elbows that just came in quick succession. Just quickly, don't give him any chance to hold on. So what does it say? I don't want to make too many, declarations, but certainly you can tell that Machida's older. You can tell that the game has kind of caught up a little bit, that his style's a little bit easier to manage, and I think that he doesn't take a shot all that well at this point in his career, which is to be expected. How could he? The guy's nearly 40 years old. You're not going to be able to do that. So do I think he can still compete and win? Sure. He obviously still has it, both from a desire standpoint and from some level of competitive ability, but I think the upper echelon of that division has probably passed him by at this point, which is kind of sad, because he was a really important part of the UFC for many years, and I think some of the ways in which he forced us to rethink what worked and what didn't in the UFC was really important, and certainly he was not the only one doing that, but he was a big contributor, and he won a UFC title. But, I don't know if those 2 years off hurt him or helped him, which is to say that, if you can't get up there and compete, that can probably stunt your development. On the other hand, he may have needed a break, and he told me that he was working on his wrestling and his grappling this whole time. Didn't really get a chance to show it. I think he thought Brunson was not going to be all that willing to strike with him, and Brunson was right, dipping left, rolling, bang, caught him. Pretty great job by Derek Brunson, have to say. Colby Covington, everyone's favorite, defeating Demian Maia, 29-27, 30-27, and 30-26. The scorecards are a bit wonky, but here's the basic idea. Maia was able to land the left, especially early in the first round, and had his moments at other points. Colby Covington is what I would call a more advanced wrestle boxer. He's a very good wrestler. Tyron Woodley was on Twitter sort of chirping about how Colby couldn't punch all that hard. There might be something to that. I didn't necessarily think he was throwing with reckless abandon here. It just looked to me like he just wanted to keep touching him. Keep touching him. Keep putting the jab in his face. Keep jab crossing. Keep pushing him back. Keep making him react. Colby Covington doesn't really move his head a lot, so that's why I think he was able to get countered a few times. But by the end of that third round, man, he was beating the brakes off Demian Maia. Maia was bleeding badly, barely hanging on. And I think the real big takeaway for me is you talk about Cerrone at UFC Poland and you talk about Lyoto Machida here as well as Demian Maia. It's not that he can't fight good guys. I think what happened was Jorge Masvidal was really the first one that began to show how you can properly game plan for Demian Maia. Now you might say, well, he lost that bout and had his back taken all 3 times. That's right, but there was a couple of things he did, both in back defense and takedown defense, that I think caused a bit of a eureka moment. Then you had Tyron Woodley, and we went over how exactly he beat it. Remember, Demian Maia doesn't have a great shot, will wrestle from his knees. He's expecting you to stuff him, and then what you would commonly do in another scenario, which is cut a corner as you separate. You can separate head on too, but a lot of guys like to put their hips down and then turn because it makes the takedown even harder, but that's under traditional wrestling terms. Remember, Demian Maia wants you to get that turn so then he can sort of baseball slide his half guard into it. And once he's got you locked in half guard, then he digs the underhook, and now the whole thing is just a disaster for you. My basic point is this: Colby Covington, following on the work of Tyron Woodley, following the work of Jorge Masvidal, and many others as well, wasn't the first guy to shut him down from a takedown standpoint. Anderson Silva did to an extent too, but the more modern welterweight version, they've basically figured out how to stop Demian Maia now in terms of the takedown. I think people have got him figured out. Now, you might need somebody like a Woodley or a Covington who's an All-American level wrestler to do it, but it's a much more manageable task than it once was. Strategically, people know exactly what kind of takedown defense they need to have to shut down because his first effort is never really great. It's that second and third effort where Demian Maia really begins to cause problems for guys. They have completely shut that down. If they shut that down, they make it about the first attempt. If you make it about the first attempt, you're probably going to win pretty well. One of the things that Colby Covington, I don't know if folks appreciated this, Demian Maia would be in on a whizzer. You would watch Covington with the whizzer as Maia's in on him. You would watch him whizzer hard to push Maia's weight a certain way and to stop a takedown or to sort of control his movement to force a movement forward. And then he would turn back into him and fish the far side underhook. And that way he got his hips moving in the same direction and he was controlling it, which allowed him to then turn and fire the underhook, so he never got his back taken. He never got pushed and turned in a corner. He was the one turning. He was the one sort of arranging everything. Really, really impressive stuff, because if you go this way and you don't quickly come back in, even if you got that whizzer, it can be a problem for you. He had everything down to a science in terms of, you kept hearing his corner say, cut him loose, cut him loose, cut him loose, because he would stop it, and he wouldn't cut the angle. He would face him straight on. So, look, where's Covington in that division? I don't know. You got a bunch of killers there right now. You got Darren Tills, Kamaru Usmans, you got Colby Covington. I'm sorry, that's a great win over a very, very tough guy in Demian Maia. It's a lot of interesting new blood. I can't wait to see how they matchmake around it. We'll see what RDA happens with Lawler. But welterweight and Ponzinibbio and Perry, there's a lot of really exciting fights at welterweight right now. And I know Colby Covington said some things that pissed people off. We'll discuss that on the live chat. And there are some things he does really well, some things he does not so well necessarily for this level. But that's a great win. Totally shut Demian Maia down by the end of that third round. He was laying the smackdown on him, and there's just no two ways about it. Pedro Munoz defeating Rob Font, guillotine choke. How familiar does that sound? 4:03 of the first round. Pedro Munoz probably has the best guillotine in the UFC, just flat out. Maybe Demian Maia has a better one, just doesn't show it. Pedro Munoz has guillotines arm in. He has guillotines off a takedown. So if you're trying to take him down, he can jump guillotine. He's got guillotines on same side arm in, which you saw against Russell Doan, I believe. He has guillotine setups from the back, which I think was the same one against Russell Doan. Pedro Munoz's guillotines are absolutely vicious. He has such an excellent command of that position, that execution, that submission. He's so good there. And, Rob Font was looking really good. He was getting touched up a little bit, and that left hand did rock him, and which is why he had that panicked shot. I think if Rob Font had shot in on him in a way he wanted to in a more planned scenario, he probably would have gotten caught that way. But Rob Font, he's got one knock on him. I had him on my show, and we talked about this. I asked him what the power was like of John Lineker. You recall he previously fought John Lineker and went the distance with him. Lost, but went the distance. And he said that the power was so shocking that it sped the fight up real fast for him. Like once he got hit with it, it was so transformative that he wanted to stay away from it, that he wasn't making calm, rational choices anymore. And so as a consequence, he really just felt like he needed to not do that this time. And I don't know that, it's not altogether uncommon to get hit with a shot and then go for a takedown, especially if you're rocked. But there might be something to be said for, finding a way to be calm in the storm a little bit more when things don't go exactly your way. Because when he was tuning him up with the jab and then the cross, he was doing excellent. He had Munoz's face bloodied within a minute. Already. He's an excellent fighter and a very good striker. He just kind of makes a little bit of panic decisions sometimes, and that gets him into trouble. But, man, Pedro Munoz, wow, what a guillotine this guy has. He is total command of this thing. And what I really like about Pedro Munoz's guillotine, which goes, and it didn't help, well, he won the fight, but it didn't help Figueredo that much. He can sit for the guillotine if he needs, but when he sits for the guillotine, he's always on a hip. Or what he likes to do, and a lot of guys like to do, like Brian Kelleher, they don't just jump the guillotine, they jump the guillotine and turn to a mount or turn to a side, so that if they have to get away, they can keep head control, get their hips, and then stand away. Just jumping to guillotine on your back doesn't work. And he rolled him over, hit him Luke Rockhold, a Michael Bisping style for the first fight, where you have the one-arm guillotine and then you use the hand not merely as a way to balance yourself, but to get more pressure. If you just try to guillotine like a mermaid where you're leaning backwards, it's going to be kind of hard if you're in a mount. But if you can put your hand down, then drive your hips in, boy, you can cause them all kinds of problems. And look how fast Font tapped. That kind of told the story. Francisco Trinaldo defeating Jim Miller, 29-28, two old war horses. It just looked like to me that the physicality eventually wore down on Miller. Miller jumping for submission, not getting it, ending up on the bottom in the second round, and of course ended up underneath in the third round too. Had his moments standing, but it just looked like, Trinaldo wasn't getting backed up with the power of Miller. He was landing. Miller was doing pretty good, and had a good double, several good doubles in this fight, but it just looked to me like he just couldn't really get enough to make Trinaldo stop doing what he wanted to do. And as a consequence, once he really got loose and free-flowing, which is his natural, that's when he's at his best, it was just too little too late. So it wasn't like Miller got blown out, and it wasn't like Trinaldo looked amazing, but it was just enough of a physicality difference and a comfortability difference that I think, made it in the end for Mesa Renduba. Thiago Santos, this one surprised me, defeating Jack Hermansson. Wow, 4:59 of the first round. I don't know what it was, man. Thiago Santos is a very, very talented guy. They noted he kind of keeps his chin in the air a little bit, but the big difference to me is that I think Hermansson is extremely talented, and I still think he's got a bright future. We'll have to see how things go. But Santos was the one who was out there being proactive. They tell you, be first, be first, be first. Don't react, don't wait. It looked like to me like from the word go, Santos was just much more willing to exchange both at range and in the pocket and in combination. And once he really got going with those first few minutes, Hermansson, who was already kind of offensively muted, got even more offensively muted. He really began to shell up, and that's just when the combination started flowing, and that last flurry then dropped him and then followed it up. That was all she wrote. To me, the biggest lesson there is, yes, Thiago Santos is obviously, he looks like a destroyer. But to me, it was just that it was a certain comfortability with the exchanges, a comfortability with, what does it take to win? I need to land first. I need to land often. I'm just going to throw. And he threw. And Hermansson just didn't really step on the gas with any kind of offensive urgency. And I think once he began to build that lead, he just let it go from that point, and he got finished. Not the best performance by Jack Hermansson. Great win for Thiago Santos. I actually rank this as one of his better wins, to be honest. Not merely because he put the guy away in the first round, but because he put a very, very good prospect away in the first round as well. John Lineker defeating Marlon Vera. Boy, this one was surprising. 30-27, 29-28, and two judges' scorecards. Now, not surprising that Lineker won. I gotta say, how about the development of Chito Vera? This is one of those guys, he came from Ecuador. He was training with amateurs and like lawyers and accountants in this town he was from in Ecuador. I don't think he lived in Quito. I think he lived outside of it, but doesn't matter. He was pretty good, and then he eventually realized, I'm not going to get as good as I need to be here. Went and trained with Colin Oyama, basically a legendary trainer at this point, and man, has he gotten better. Wow, switching stances, staying composed. And then what really surprised me was he got better as the fight went on. He was using the height differential to really throw knees to try and attack in the clinch, really bring the head down. they were saying that the power of Lineker translated up a weight class. Don't misunderstand me. I am not saying he doesn't hit hard for bantamweight. He might be the hardest hitter at bantamweight, or certainly one of them. I think Cody Garbrandt might want to challenge for that title a little bit, but the title of hardest hitter, not champion. But Marlon Vera kind of took it. To be honest, I was Lineker's Lineker, and I think he does a lot of things that folks don't anticipate. He took his time early in the first round. He definitely likes to go to the body, then head combinations. He's really good about pushing you back because the best work he does is when your back is against the fence. Out in open space, he's not quite as good. He really needs you to be tall and leaning, and then he likes to really dig in. And Vera gave him some of that, no doubt about it. Like the rightful guy won this. I'm just saying, man, even in a loss, this was an eye-opening performance for me from Marlon Vera because I didn't know how he was going to do, to be honest. I knew he was on a 3-fight win streak and he looked amazing against Brian Kelleher, but Lineker's Lineker, right? Once the sledgehammer drops, usually most of the people drop with it, and he sat there and took it and then got better over the course of the fight. Wow. Very good job by Marlon Vera. One of these guys out of Latin America, man, that might make some noise as he keeps going. He's still young as well, I think 24 years old. So keep your eyes on Chito, man. John Lineker is a beast, and again, rightful winner, and he did great. But I just feel like, to me, the bigger story there was, yes, John Lineker's amazing, but Chito Vera, while he was a little bit outclassed in this one, if that had gone 5 rounds, how would that have looked? I don't know. Might have been a little more competitive than we might have imagined. How about Vicente Luque? He looked on fire in this performance when he took on Nico Price, winning at 408 of the second round via Darce choke. Nico Price going into this undefeated. Bit of an awkward style. Vicente Luque going high with the leg kicks, then low with the leg kicks, but just staying on him. And what really, to me, began to set up the end was they were kind of just sort of trading shots for a little while. Leg kicks notwithstanding, those were all pretty much one-sided. But from the punching standpoint, they were kind of trading shots. And then I believe Price threw a right. You saw Luque slip it and then come with like a 3-punch combo at the end, all of which landed clean. That bloodied up Nico's face, and I think that gave Luque just this incredible amount of confidence, and he just poured it on him. And then setting it up, that Darce choke from basically nowhere. Tony Ferguson gets a lot of credit for his Darce choke, and he should, because it's awesome. Vicente Luque has a very good Darce choke, and what I really loved about it was he tried to set it up, realized it wasn't there, let it go a little bit, but not totally. Just kind of opened it up just a little bit, right? Let me make sure my mic's still working because I banged on it. Yeah, let's see here. Yes, it is. Just let it go a little bit, and as Nico stood, he created the space that Luque needed, so then Luque just resealed it. That is just so smart. Presence of mind, hit it again. And that's one of his better submissions, man. A lot of guys have jump guillotines. He can't quite jump Darce, but he can find it in moments where you don't think it's applicable, where you're not even thinking about it. Most guys try to set up Darce by, they want to get the head first, they want to wrap it and then come around. And so if they're pressing on the back of the head with the elbow or pulling it in onto the back of the neck, hey, a Darce might be coming. He doesn't do that. He just fires it on real fast, lets it loose so you think, oh, I'm free. And you stand and he puts it right back on. Vicente Luque, man, that was a great, great performance. And, another welterweight guy. We'll see how far he can progress, but that was a solid win for him. My guy, man, Shoeface. I can't say enough good things about him. Defeats Jack Marshman at 4:30 of the first round. I'm going to talk about this in the second segment, but I just want to say I think Antonio Carlos Jr. has some of the best jiu-jitsu in all of MMA, maybe in the UFC now. Is he as good at Demian Maia as at jiu-jitsu? Not in that way, not even in MMA. Just in terms of pure ability to control. He doesn't fight that way. He likes to fight more on his feet. And the real big thing about Maia is that he can advance very quickly. It's not that Carlos Jr. can't. What I'm trying to say is, one of the reasons why I like his jiu-jitsu more than almost anybody, if not everybody, is because, number one, you go back to the Spicely fight, he has modern jiu-jitsu. He has modern guards, he has modern attacks, he has modern passes. They're out there fighting from 50-50 and reverse De La Riva and all kinds of stuff. You don't see anybody doing that in the UFC except Shoeface and Spicely and maybe like one other guy, and they don't do it nearly as well as Shoeface. So in that sense, he's got a much more modern game. But the thing I really love about it is we talk about big men having small men jiu-jitsu, where they're really nimble off their back and they've got high hips, they can hit in arm bars and everything's tight and crunched on arm bars and well put together, and they don't muscle things, but they end up having this sort of gravity to them that makes everything work at the same time. What I really love about Shoeface is, A, his game is modern. B, he does have that. He is a big man who has small man, very nimble jiu-jitsu. But at the same time, when he needs to act like a big man, with the way in which he's controlling an opponent, he can. So a lot of guys, you'll have these guys who are these big men who try small man jiu-jitsu, and they'll just play against their strength sometimes. They'll play guard a little bit too much. They'll play underneath a little bit too much. Shoeface can do that if he needs to, and he can do it very, very well. But he also understands, I'm a big, strong dude. This is MMA. Let me get on top and let me work that game. And then once things begin to happen and open up, then I'll bring my small man jiu-jitsu to bear. It is such a potent combination. If he can keep it going, it's amazing. I was going to go look at all of his rear naked chokes. He's got 4 of them now. There's no real point to that because the fights are so different, but you'll notice he has a lot of submissions, this fight notwithstanding, kind of late. And even in this one, he got the takedown pretty early and then goes to the submission much later in the round. He takes his time, and I really, really appreciate that about him. He can do everything. He can play small, he can play big, he can play fast, he can play slow, he can play old, he can play modern. I'm telling you, man, in terms of the well-roundedness of his jiu-jitsu for MMA, it might be the very best in all anywhere. Again, Demian Maia's game is so suffocating, and he can do so many things. That's true. But as you're seeing now, people have kind of figured out all the ways in which to stop his takedown and to stop that second, third entry. Carlos Jr. doesn't quite have that rep yet, but just the way he can play all the various levels of what he needs to. In that sense, he's basically peerless in my judgment. And then when you add in the modernity of his guards and the modernity of his passes, he's amazing. We're going to look at his fight in the second segment. Jared Gordon defeating Hakran Diaz. Man, he put a beat down on this poor guy. 29-26, 29-27, 30-26. Scores a little bit all over the places. One time the referee put his hands on him and he was like, is this fight over or not? I give credit to Hakran Diaz for trying to get that armbar late in that third round, right as the fight ended. It shows a little bit of grit and determination. That's hard to do. But you can see Hakran Diaz is one of these really big, powerful guys who is very, very skilled. Don't misunderstand me. He is very, very skilled. But there's a certain level of finesse I think he misses because he gets away with his own physicality. He had a body lock. Gordon had the whizzer, and he was rotating him into the whizzer and had him on his knees. If he had stopped and then use the far side knee to block and then push into it, he could have rotated him over, or he could have essentially just bulldozed him over and gotten it. And he just kind of wanted to just He-Man him over a little bit. So there's a little bit of finesse missing on that stuff. And Jared Gordon, man, the real story of that to me, he just put a pace on him the guy couldn't handle. Strong, aggressive, capable. Diaz was early, but as every minute passed, Gordon will stuff a takedown and get back up, or slow a takedown, or just do something. And then over time, begin to get, once he got on top of Diaz, stuffing takedowns and getting on top, and then just crushing him from underneath. Hammer fists and elbows and guard passes and everything else. He just beat him with pace. And it's a solid win, man. Really, really solid win for him. So congratulations. Elizeu Zaleski dos Santos defeating Max Griffin. People love this fight. I thought it was fine, especially for Max Griffin to hang on the way he did. He wins, Dos Santos does, 29-28, 29-27, 29-28. I also realized it was called Fight of the Night. That to me was not my favorite Fight of the Night by any stretch of the imagination, but Max Griffin just kind of hung on. Dos Santos is one of those guys, man, who you've seen in a number of fights now where he doesn't mind just being in the trenches because he takes damage, but not a ton of damage. Not so much damage that it really begins to make him question his decision making. He takes just enough damage to wear it a little and then keep going. He doesn't take so much damage that he's beginning to second guess himself. He has this rep as this guy in the trenches, which he deserves to be because he'll go out there and slug it out and take risks. But the reality is he's actually just careful enough to avoid the major challenges that can affect decision-making. And so as a consequence, you see him stick to these game plans. And by the way, he's landing the whole time too. So he's a little bit deceptive in that sense. As one of these guys who's like, yeah, he'll take one to give one. Sort of. He will. But the one he's going to take is not going to be nearly as strong as the one he delivers. And I think that, in the end, has made a big difference for him. And then Davison Figueredo defeating Jared Brooks, split decision, 27-30, 29-28, 29-28. I don't really know how to score this one, if I'm being honest with you. Because, how do you want to score this? Okay, so Jared Brooks gets the takedowns throughout the course of the fight. A bunch of times, Figueredo is jumping guillotine on him, and the guillotine was never close, in my judgment. It was tight. It was painful. It sucked to get out of. Sometimes it took a little long to get out of it, but in my judgments, they were never close. Yes, there was no arm in. He had it blade of the hand on the fist, grabbing it, and he was pulling in it. But I got to be honest, when I see a guy in full guard pulling like this, I never really give that much play anymore. Sometimes that will work. Sometimes that will work at the UFC level, but it's not really going to work on anybody good. Why? For a whole lot of reasons. Because number one, that one's easier to defend when you have it from full guard and you're leaning straight back. Number two, you're not giving it a proper crank. Yes, you're closing it on the trachea, but you can open up on one of the sides and then the back of the neck. You got to remember, with the guillotine, it's not just that you're collapsing here, it's that you're controlling all the way around, shoulder and arm to the back of their shoulder and whatnot, to make sure that it's sealed. Once you start getting an arm that goes past the crown of the head, what's his face? The guy with the donkey guard. He has it where he has a guillotine around the back of, or around the crown of someone's head. But he's special. He's different. The overwhelming, even Marcelo Garcia. Once you start getting past the crown of the head, it's lost. And these would start on the crown of his head. And so you just know he's waiting, because what was he not doing? He was not turning to a hip to make the guillotine even stronger, to really get up on side. You want to put weight on the back of this. It's not just crushing this. You got to put weight on the back of this. And if you're just leaning and you're leaning back, it's hard. It's very, very, and if not outright impossible against anybody good who knows that's what you're doing. You can frame, you can tripod, you tripod up, and then you put your opposite side arm in their throat, and there's all different kinds of ways to get out of that, and he did, and he got out of literally all of them. What does that tell you? I mean, yes, who's doing more? The guy with the submission attempt that was not very close, or the guy who defends it and then doesn't do a whole lot on top? It's really hard to say. So I'm not really mad necessarily, but he had a Kimura there in the third round, but that wasn't very close either. Kimura from full guard. I'm not saying you can't get it, but it's very, very difficult. Most Kimuras are from Z-guard or from knee shield or a half guard of some kind, and it wasn't very close. So to me, it's like, I don't really know how you judge this one. Jared Brooks got the takedowns over and over and over again. Figueredo was jumping guillotine, but they were not particularly close. You just got to remember, when you're on guillotine on somebody, yes, you want to lean a little bit, but you want to lean in a way where you're putting your weight on the back of their neck and the sort of the small of their head, where like a punch would be illegal, and then you're bringing all of that down and in, so that they're yes, like you might be leaning a little bit, but it's more leaning to a side, pulling in. And if you do the kind where Marcelo Garcia does it, you bring the elbow on top, then that needs to be pressing into them while you pull, like a scissor effect. So like it's all different kinds of. He didn't do the high elbow guillotine, so. It's like, I don't know, man. I don't really know what to say about it other than, I guess a split decision is probably right. But the two minds is, yeah, you got the takedowns, didn't do anything with him. Yeah, you got the submission attempts, but they weren't really close. I don't know. And by the way, just because somebody grimaces on a submission attempt does not mean that it's going to work or that it's close. And you might say, well, look, if you're grimacing, it's by definition close. Right. You can be on submissions, especially like a guillotine, and you can have it for a second. Remember, these are all feel, and you got to get it just right sometimes, when you're learning, and even when you're an expert, you have to, certain conditions have to be established. Look at Pedro Munoz's guillotine, it's different. What does he do? He also rolls to people to get it. But in this one, there could be a moment where it like hurts, and then you can realize, it's getting looser and looser and looser. Or it can be, as it gets looser, believe it or not, from the technicality of the grip, it can go through a stage where it gets worse on its way off. It's hard to explain exactly, but, yeah, you get the idea. And then Marcelo Golm defeating Christian Colombo, rear naked choke, 2 minutes of the first round. There you go. All right. Your fight of the night, Elizeu Zaleski dos Santos versus Max Griffin. Those boys got $50,000 each. And then your performance of the night, Derek Brunson and Pedro Munoz. Pedro Munoz, obviously, I think very, very deserving of that. Derek Brunson, too. But I said it before, I'll say it again. I think Shoeface, Antonio Carlos Jr., I can't say enough good things about this guy. I am amazed at how well he's progressing. Middleweight looks good for him. Let's go to the second segment now. Let's take a look at exactly how he got it done against Jack Marshman. Okay, as I mentioned before, this isn't the most amazing win ever I've ever seen. This is not, the most amazing jiu-jitsu I've ever seen. But I just feel like we don't talk enough in MMA about Shoeface. We kind of talk about his funny nickname, but we don't really talk about the fact about what he's doing. And again, I cannot encourage you more. If you're a Fight Pass customer, please go back and watch the Eric Spicely fight. That might be from both guys, Spicely as well as Shoeface. Some of the, if not the best example of modern jiu-jitsu and MMA. So he can play that level. If you want to play 50-50 guard with him and reverse De La Riva, he can do all that. Beyond that, he can do so much. So that's pretty amazing. That's one thing that really catches my attention. But the other thing is just how well he understands how to play the jiu-jitsu game in MMA. And how much of a force he is. He'll strike with you a long time. He doesn't force the takedown. If it comes, it comes. If he needs to submit you in the third round, he's got 2 rear naked chokes late in the third round. I should tell you a lot. And even in this fight, as I mentioned before, he doesn't get the takedown right away. And even when he gets the takedown not right away, he doesn't force the submission right away. He kind of works at it a little bit. And so this is what I love. He kicks Marshman. Marshman kind of almost catches it. Shoeface pulls it out and then digs this underhook, and here we are against the fence, right? So let's sort of look at this. Now you see what Marshman, I keep calling him Marshman like he's the editor of Deadspin. Marshman, what is he doing here? What do you notice? He's pushing off against the head. He's trying to break the posture. Okay, I understand that. He's got the whizzer. All right, I understand that too. He's got the body lock. But it looks to me as Shoeface tries to bring this leg around that Marshman tries to toss him here. See, that looks like he's almost going for an Uchimata. But here's the best place you see it when he really digs in and then tries to roll him forward. You see he grabs his own wrist almost like a Kimura, right? Like a double wrist lock, puts a hand here, and then tries to toss him over. But this is never going to work because you're back up against the fence. You can't get the space you need to launch them. You have to be in open space for that. You might be able to turn them towards the fence. Like you can get Shoeface's face over on this, but you're not going to get him ass over tea kettle. That's not going to happen. Plus, his weight is already kind of behind you. Who's got the lower hips here? Shoeface does. Barely, but he does. So this is not going to work. If you're going to do a throw, you got to get your hips under their hips, not on top. So that doesn't work. And what Shoeface does is he rotates into him and then rotates around the other way. And look at this commitment deep underneath, like a baseball slide even. Look at that. So he goes he goes clockwise. Marshman thinks he's going to get a throw. He's not. And then he goes counterclockwise, scoops the leg in and around, rotating in a circle, and then bringing him down. Just a real nice takedown against the fence. Nothing too amazing, but pretty solid stuff. Especially when an opponent makes a mistake, you take advantage of it. You don't let him have that one back. That was a costly error by Marshman, and that's the kind of thing you want to see from somebody at this level, right? So here we go. He immediately moves to half guard. I want to show you something here. He loves this, where rather than having a leg out, he'll do this to pass by the knee. Then he likes to drop his weight and bring everything tucked on the inside, just to make sure that your leg can't do scooting, or if you do any scooting, that it just doesn't go very far. He's really good about that. And you see he takes his time here. Look at the time on the clock, 3:22, He's not really going to force anything, but he's going to slowly show you things that really eat you up a little bit. So here's an example of one. So here you see he's got, he's got the lockdown. All right, that's not nothing. And you see Shoeface is going to reach up and crossface. This happened over and over and over again. This had to be exhausting for Marshman to do this. You might say, well, he's not moving his lower body, right? But your lower body is in this isometric hold while your upper body core is trying to get going. You're probably panicking a little bit. This is a terrible place to be. All right, so then look at this. Now, Shoeface is on this side of him, so he was probably looking a little bit this direction, but I went back and watched to make sure. Here at 257, look at the shoulder pressure that Shoeface puts on him. And you can ask, well, how can you tell the shoulder pressure is good? Well, number one, he changes colors a little bit. That's always a dead giveaway. Two, it's on the jaw. Sometimes guys can go on the neck a little bit. I think in MMA it's a little bit harder to do. They'll go underneath the neck, kind of on top of the jaw to get the turn. And to get the pressure, but really here's how you can tell. He's making him look away. That's how you know. He's not looking. Look, his body is facing straight up. His head is turned that way. If someone's shoulder pressure is so good that your head is turned to the left or the right, you're getting dominated. Period. I don't know how else to say it. That is very bad for you. Not least of which because it hurts real bad. But beyond that, if you control someone's head and their hips, they are dead. they are dead meat to you. Now, you can see he opened up this again because he's from the toes driving out all that weight onto your jaw. It will feel like I went to Marcelo's once. This is a couple years ago, and I had Bernardo Faria show me his shoulder pressure, and I thought my jaw was going to break. It was horrible. Horrible, horrible. And Shoeface is not a small guy. So I just want to show you some like a finer technical detail here, making him look away on the balls of his feet. Bruh, it's just, this is a horrible place to be. Just horrible. All right. He lets it go eventually. And actually, Marshman does something kind of good. He digs an underhook, right? Watch this. And then scoots his hip out and gets to an elbow. This is really good. You want to have your, whatever leg is on top of their leg, if you're underneath, you want to get the same side underhook. And you kind of want to rotate around. But look at the problem here, which Shoeface addresses immediately. Number one, he puts his entire weight, like when you're behind their arm with this underhook, it's just too hard, okay? Because he can put his whole body weight on the hook itself. It's hard to get that hook and to get that elbow away from your body to create space. Yes, you're up on your own elbow on the right side, but if you collapse this hook, it's just not very potent. You can see he can't get his feet out either because Zapata was raising his other leg. So he's got that underhook, which is good, on the same side, even better, but he can't do a whole lot with it because he's crowding the space. He's lifting here while dropping here, not letting him get any part of the stable structure he needs to be able to positionally advance. Just again, knowing when to play small man's jiu-jitsu, knowing when to play big man's jiu-jitsu. This is the exact spot you want to play big man's jiu-jitsu, and he does it perfectly. All right, so we keep going, and then you can see Marshman kind of stays on this, but look at that. I mean, it's touching his elbow. It's almost as if and you can see he got lit up here by a leg kick. It's no good. He's got the underhook on the correct side. It's just not enough. You have to create a little bit of separation. You got to get your hips out. You got to get your arm raised a little bit. And Zapata just crushes him here. All right, so he gets him back down and then does this to rub it in for good measure. Puts his head underneath his chin. Look, lays him totally flat. Totally flat. Rule number 1, never lay flat. I mean, if you're really, really good, you can play with that, But basically, never lay flat. Never lay flat. Always be on a hip or sitting up or something. Never be flat. And he got him flat. And you can see he's taking his time too, Sorry, so we keep going. All right. Lockdown is back on. That's not nothing. All right, that's good. So we keep going. You can see Shoeface wants to get rid of the lockdown. Now, how do you get rid of the lockdown? There's a couple of ways you can do it. One is you can try and raise your leg up like this. I'm not exactly sure how you want to finish it, but think of it this way. You can actually move your shin. You ever seen a hamstring curl, right? Where you bring your heel to your rear end or your heel up. What you want to do is you bring your heel to your rear end and then you windshield wiper, if it's your right leg to your right, then your left. If it's your left leg to your left, then your right. You essentially do that because what it does is it essentially unwinds it. The other way to do it is the way he'll do here in just a second. Now, he can't get it to work this time. But see, what you would do is you would just bring this up and then windshield wiper it and then bring your knee past, which we'll get to in just a second. He doesn't do either of those things because he actually tries something a little bit different. He tries to fish it off with his instep. And he actually manages to make it work, sort of. But I just want to show you that's what he's doing. You can do it this way because this is the leg of Marshman. If you push down on this, you can slide that one out. But remember, he might be threatening certain things to see what kind of reactions he can get, not necessarily because he expects automatic success. So we keep going. All right, I love this one. Cross faces him here. Look at Marshman. What's the problem here? He is flat on his back. Terrible, terrible place to be. Okay, so what does Shoeface do? This knee on chest, whatever this is, and then just bangs on him. There's the right hand of Shoeface. And then it kind of slides to the shoulder as he creates room for it. But that had to be horrible. You got this big Brazilian donkey right on top of you, crushing you, controlling you, taking you down, taking you out of your game. Now he's resting his weight on you. And here's what I love about this. A lot of people think this is not exactly knee on belly, right? Because it would be this leg if it was knee on belly, and this one would be out to the side if you're going to be on someone's, let's say, right side here. That's how it would work. But this is what I like about it. Number one, live toes, right? You can actually take off live toes, and in a way it gets heavier, but just that he's maximally prepared for whatever Marshman's going to do. But here's what I love about this. A lot of people teach, if this was a real knee on belly, they teach sort of shin across their hip like a seatbelt. Someone showed me this years ago. If you actually go like hip to shoulder, like a not like the other part of a seatbelt, not the waist part, but the one over the shoulder, that it's much worse. And they're right. It's horrible. It controls your diaphragm from expanding. You feel way more pressed against the ground. It's just a nightmare. And I'm sure somebody can do it either way. Remember, jiu-jitsu is all about customizing a game that makes it work for you. I'm just saying that was a neat little addition I'd never seen before, and they did it, and I was like, wow, this is god-awful. It does make certain chokes harder to set up with a gi, but, that's a different story. But anyway, you see him here, and he slides over, bangs him on the right, slides back down, and then he comes here, and, Marshman locks up the head here, but that's not what you want, because he can grab the wrist and pull the head out, and now you got all kinds of problems. He can bring this one over, and now he's trapped you, So you never really want to do that if you can avoid it. He can set up a head and arm triangle. All right, so this is the beginning of the end here. Now, at this point, the lockdown is barely on, but it is on. And now he's leaning. Look at Marshman again. Look at this weight coming over. Look at Marshman turning to the left. Again, must be crippling shoulder pressure, right? Doesn't even need it the whole time. Just needs it enough to advance. So here we go. And look at Marshman, still looking away. I'm telling you, bro, this is vicious, vicious shoulder pressure. I bet you his jaw was sore that night. So what's he doing? He's pressing on this, right? He's pressing on this because what he wants to do is he wants to get this left leg free. Now, the interesting part about this is, if you go back here, he's still basically got caught in a lockdown, sort of, because you can see he's right on top of the right instep of Marshman. What Marshman does is, here's what you're looking for when just don't look at their feet for a second. Just look at their knee, okay? Just look at this area right here. What you're looking for whenever somebody is on top in half guard like this, number one, the shoulder pressure. I mean, just look at that. Terrible, terrible, terrible from Marshman. But what you're really looking for is the following. You want to see if you can get your knee past their thigh. That's really what you're looking for, and there's ways to get there. You can do what's called heel-toe, where you just move your toe in, then your heel, then your toe, then your heel, and it raises it up so that this makes it easier to push off from a leverage standpoint. But that's what you're looking for. You're looking to get that. He presses this to the point where I think Marshman was like, well, he's going to get out. If he's going to get out, let me just go ahead and push off. So he plants his feet here. Look at him. He lets go, and you see more. And you look, he does not actually cross the line here. He actually never gets it from this position. But Marshman plants his feet and tries to bridge. Now look where he is. Now he's totally past at that point. Now you can stop him and so he can only get 3/4 mount if you want, but that's how you advance from that position. You're looking to get this knee past their thigh line. Once you have that, you're in good shape. A lot of different ways you can set that up. He set it up through this combination of shoulder pressure and then pushing, expecting Marshman puts his feet down, he bucks, and then he just slides. Like he just opened it. It reminded me of what CM Punk did to Mickey Gall, where you just plant your feet, and because you think if you have a big motion that it's all going to work, and then it doesn't work, and then the guy advances on you. So that's what he does here, and he just slides right past. Remember, in jiu-jitsu, you want to do things on your terms. You don't want to do them on their terms. If someone's trying to break your guard, you want to open your guard on your terms, not their terms. If they're opening your guard and then you decide to open it, you're going to be in problems. If someone's trying to pass and then you open it, thinking you're going to use one big motion because he's forcing you in that direction, you'll just go with it, but then you'll put force behind it. You're just giving it to them. He's controlled your head. How much are you really going to buck anyway? If your head is controlled, your hips are not going to move that much. So we keep going. Now he's in full mount. I want to show you a difference here. What's the difference between this and this in mount? Well, yes, his posture's up. He's not exactly driving it into him here, but technically speaking, if you see someone chest to chest with their knees behind their hip line, they're driving their weight down into the guy because he might be squirmy underneath. Once they stop squirming, they bring their weight under them. Now you'll notice they're connected hip to hip here. This is actually good for Marshman in the sense of if you're going to be mounted, what's the best case scenario mounted? because that gives you the maximum amount of push on this. So what does he do? He tries to buck. But look what he does. He does get some pressure up. He's got space beneath him, but Shoeface brings the heels together. That's going to stop. He posts the hand. This hand is going to beat your hips in a straight line every time. Every time it's going to beat you, okay? It's not going to work. So how do you get out of something like this? Well, it's not so easy, but the trick to bridging is, and this is a hard thing for big men to accept, because they're so used to being powerful and rolling. Even if you roll like a welterweight guy and you're like a big middleweight or a light heavyweight, they think they're so powerful that they can just basically get out of this. And by the way, I don't know what Marshman does when he trains. I'm sure he trains very hard, but I'm just saying generally a lot of big guys don't like to play underneath, which is why Shoeface is kind of interesting in that regard. But the big thing is you have to keep, and you have, and this is just the thing, I've said it before in this podcast. I had this black belt show me this one time. His point was, you have to bridge, not straight back. You have to bridge side to side, and you have to keep going side to side until you've escaped. You have to bridge over your shoulder one direction, then the next. And there's things you want to do with your hands in between, pushing on their knee, pushing on their hip, right, to get yours out. But that's what you have to do. Straight back is a non-starter. To the side is a non-starter if you only go one way. You have to go side to side. And training a guy that big for that kind of intense cardio is very, very hard. A lot of guys don't do it. They don't ever put themselves here. Again, I don't know what Marshman did. He may train very hard, and hey, Shoeface is really talented. I don't know. I'm just saying as a general rule, side to side to side to side until the job is done. And that's a hard thing to accept mentally. Once you're in this position, it's going to take a shitload of cardio to get out. Technique, yes. Timing, of course. Cardio, too. I don't know how else to say it. So he does this, which I like. There's a lot of different mount escapes you can do. One of them is you buck and you bring them in the air and you put their hands on your hips. You put your hands on their hips and then you kind of scoot out. But you got to scoot out to a side. He's kind of closed. You can't just scoot out straight. And he kind of closed off the avenue here. Now, Marshman actually does get, look at this. This is pretty good, right? Not too bad. He didn't get enough elevation at first, so it's never really going to go anywhere. And if you're just holding a spot with your arms straight in jiu-jitsu, we talked about this a couple of weeks ago on the Monday Morning Analyst, this means you're in trouble, right? If you're just holding that like that, someone this good is going to eventually get around you. But you can see he's creating space, and he finally turns to a side. He needs to turn back to the other side and then back to the side, although his underwear is or his pants are coming off, so maybe he was distracted. I don't know. A lesson for the future. But you can see, look, you can see that this is being pushed back a little bit. Side to side is the key. It's the key. But look how far down he is. He's around the knees. If he could have just pulled his legs out, I wonder really to what extent the shorts coming down impacted him. But nevertheless, you can see he gets pretty far, actually. But it's not enough. And Shoeface just cross faces him and slides right back up. So this is terrible. I mean, that's basically all the cardio you're going to really have. I mean, it's just hard underneath like that. So here we are. He's now wrapping up. Let's see what he does here. He goes for a Ezekiel briefly. Do you guys notice that at 47 seconds left? He briefly goes for an Ezekiel, doesn't get it. Sits up. Marshman says, I'm out of here. Sits up with this arm and decides to roll, but doesn't roll very effectively. How do I know that? Because of this. He is bellied out. His heels are in the air. Shoeface actually can't take the back because there's nothing to take. Now, if he's going to roll this way, I'm going to wait to sink this hook in. That's the one I have to time just right because this one's probably already going to be there to roll into. You want to time this one. That's the one you're looking for, right? So you'll notice he kind of has to wait for him because he bellies out. And once his hips come up and his knees come under him, watch what Shoeface does. Whoop. Here comes the first one. He's going to grip that up. He's waiting for this hole to be exposed. And then as soon as he comes up, he sinks the hooks. And he's leaning off to a side because he's going to pull him off to that side when he finally sinks in. He tries for a bi-triangle, doesn't get it. In the process, brings the hands through. All right, you can see what's he going to do? Dump his weight forward, right? So now you're kind of just wrestling with everything forward on your face. Your hands can't really move. You're kind of stuck on your elbows. All this weight is driving down, but you're good because he's balancing off of his head and fist. You see that? Drives the hand through, catches it, and then rolls him to a side. All right, and this is what he's so good. You'll notice that's not in. It might be on your jaw, but it's not in. He does this to everybody. Go look at all of his rear naked choke finishes. He does this better than anybody. Look at that. That choke is tight. Ribs pointing out. He's going to use this to suck your hips back. He's going to drive his hips in, and he's going to pull you out from your neck, and he's going to bow you out. Look at this. Look at this. Look at that, folks. Look at him bowed out. That is insanely painful with this big-ass dude on top of you, pulling you in this direction, driving his hips, pulling your legs back, and then your head back at the same time. And the choke sinks because he starts it on your jaw, and then as he bows you out, it slides into position. I'm telling you, man. I'm telling you. People aren't making enough noise about this guy. He's got his limitations like every fighter does, but he can play jiu-jitsu in a way almost nobody else in MMA can, in terms of when you got to be big, be big. When you got to be patient, be patient. When it's time to sink the hooks in transition, he can do it. When it's time to play underneath, you do it. When it's time to play underneath with modern guards, he can do that too. Shoeface, man. Antonio Carlos Jr. Look out for this guy. And last but not least, let's take a look at what's coming up in the week ahead. 2 major events to keep in mind. The first one on Friday, Bellator is back. Bellator 186. This will be at the Bryce Jordan Center in University Park, Pennsylvania. This will be on the campus of Penn State. Pardon me. In your main event, Ryan Bader will be defending his light heavyweight title against Linton Vassell. Women's flyweight champ is going to be crowned. A rematch between Gordina, Emily Ducati, and Ilima Leigh McFarland. McFarland winning the first one. Phil Davis, Penn State alum, will take on, or alumnus, right? Yes. We'll take on Leo Leitch. Zach Freeman is back, the gentleman who upset Aaron Pico against Saad Awad. That should be violence. And then Ed Ruth, as well, the best wrestler ever out of Penn State, takes on Chris Dempsey. Then we have the big one. The big one. UFC 217 is on Saturday. As you know, Michael Bisping will take on George St. Pierre for the middleweight title. Cody Garbrandt puts his title up for grabs versus TJ Dillashaw. A third title fight. Joanna Jacek will take on Rose Namajunas. Stephen Wonderboy Thompson versus Gamebred Jorge Masvidal. Johnny Hendricks versus Bohashinia. You move to the preliminary card. James Vick versus Joseph Duffy. Damn, it's a good card. Will Harris versus Mark Godbeer. Remember, Walt Harris just got armbarred by Fabricio Verdum. Ion Kutalaba taking on Michael something. Oleg Siejchuk. Shashevsky. Randy Brown taking on Mickey Gall. And then the preliminary card, Alexei Olenek is back taking on Curtis Blades. That's a tough fight. Oven St. Preux versus Corey Anderson. And then Eamon Zahabi versus Ricardo Ramos. Okay. If you have any questions, email me, LukeThomasNews@gmail.com. I'm on Facebook as well, Facebook.com/LukeThomasNews. I'm on Instagram @LukeThomasNews. So give a follow, send an email, do what you got to do. Thank you guys so much for watching. That's it. Nothing more to say. Until then, enjoy the fights.